Today, we're turning our attention to an important topic that affects many women over the age of 40, late start investing for retirement. Now, whether you just started or are looking to enhance your retirement strategy, here's some valuable advice to help you secure your financial future. One, the importance of starting now. First and foremost, it's crucial to understand that it's never too late to begin investing for retirement. Time may not be on your side as much as it was when you were younger, but making smart investment decisions now can significantly impact your retirement nest egg. So don't let your age deter you from getting started. Number two, set clear goals. The first step to any successful investment journey is setting clear and realistic goals. Assess your current financial situation, estimate your retirement needs, and determine a timeline for when you plan to retire. Having specific objectives in mind will help guide your investment strategy and keep you focused. Number three, diversify your investments. Diversification is a key principle in late start investing. Spread your investments across a mix of assets such as stocks, bonds, real estate, and even retirement accounts like IRAs or 401ks. This approach helps minimize risk and ensures that your portfolio can weather market fluctuations. Number four, seek professional advice. Consider consulting a financial advisor. They can help you create a tailored investment plan based on your goals, risk tolerance, and time horizon. Professional guidance can be invaluable, especially if you're new to investing or are feeling overwhelmed by the options available. Number four, save aggressively. Now, given your short time frame, it's essential to save aggressively. Increase your contribution to your retirement accounts whenever possible and take advantage of catch-up contributions allowed for those over 50. Now, every extra dollar you can save now makes a big difference later. Number six, monitor and adjust. Regularly review your investment portfolio and make adjustments as needed. As you approach retirement, consider shifting your investments to a more conservative allocation to protect your gains and reduce risk. Staying actively involved in your financial planning is essential. Number seven, manage debt. Paying down high interest debt should also be a priority. Reducing debt frees up more money to invest and can improve your overall financial stability as you near retirement age. In conclusion, women over 40 embarking on a late start investing journey for retirement have the potential to achieve their financial goals with dedication and the right strategies. Remember that it's never too late to take control of your financial future. Set clear goals, diversify your investments, seek professional advice, save aggressively, and stay actively involved in your financial journey. And by following these steps, you can work towards a secure and comfortable retirement. Lisa Battaglia is an attorney and writer, and she worked as the lead Title IX gender equity attorney for the U.S. Department of Education's Office of the General Counsel for many years before taking time to raise her two kids. She recently made a bold change with a cross-country move to start a new life on Whidbey Island, Washington. She is now working with a consortium of professional STEM societies to help them advance a more inclusive and equitable culture and climate for women in sciences. She has written and published 3 novels and many short stories, which can be found at lisabattaglia.com. And she's joining us today to share about her most recent novels, which are a 2-book series titled A Midlife Romance. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today, and we're excited to hear about your book.
Thank you, Sunita, for having me. I'm very, very excited to be here.
So please share what's the inspiration of the story and a synopsis of the book series.
Yes, so I'm happy to. They are they're kind of the synopsis is captured somewhat in that subtitle. It's a midlife romance, and I was inspired absolutely by my own midlife, which you're helping women midlife. It's I think a really interesting time of life, both wonderfully expansive and also incredibly difficult, right? It's a really difficult time. And my midlife started with a bang, with my ex-husband walked out very, very suddenly, very unexpectedly, with a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old, and at home. And in some ways, I see that period as this kind of very dark decade. Like I did during COVID. We all do these. We all had time to work on ourselves, and I did a wonderful midlife exploration project with a woman in Australia. It was kind of crazy, but we could be wherever we needed to be. And at one point, it was we were looking back at the last our decade and what had happened, and my first instinct was, nothing. It was just all bad. Not nothing. Bad, bad, bad. Like all the bad things that happened. And then I had to stop myself and say, what did wait a second. What really happened in that decade? And what, really happened was a huge blossoming of my life, an independent life, a more authentic life with my kids, a restarting of a career, a restarting of relationships, all of these really wonderful things amidst all the work that needs to get done. And one of the challenges I set for myself was writing a novel, and I picked romance, in part, quite honestly, because people read romance. So I thought, well, let me write a romance novel because that's what people like and that's what people read. And then as I started down the sort of path, I just found that so many romance novels don't speak to women in midlife. We read them because they're fun, because they're sexy, and it's fun to have happy endings and it's fun to see romance. But I felt like, couldn't we have a book that would speak to people whose lives are not, they're not 20, they're not, skinny and beautiful, they're not kind of on this cusp of like anything could happen, right? I mean, that's the beauty of these stories. Like, just whatever your wildest imaginations, in some ways they put in these stories, these crazy things happen. People meet billionaires, they suddenly find themselves on yachts and traveling, and then here we are middle-aged, and we come with so much baggage already. Ultimately, I think that's wonderful. I think a true later in midlife romance is one that actually embraces all that complication, but it's a different story, right? It's a story of people who have to balance their relationship with their children and their responsibilities as a mother and their restarting of many parts of their life, and coupling that with potentially a partner who also has all those complications, who may also have his own children, has an ex who's hanging on, who makes everything complicated. And I thought, well, could that be a story that would be fun in the way romance is fun, and a story with a romance arc, but would actually embrace some of these like genuine complications that people in midlife find. So that was a big part of it, trying to sort of provide a story for people that aren't normally reflected in romance novels, and yet still desire romance, still desire partnership, sometimes are ready to write that off because it seems so hard, right? It's like forget it, I'm done. I got enough to worry about, the career and kids, and to forget it. And I hope that people don't do that, because I think we deserve more. We deserve partnership and romance, and we've learned so much at this point in our life that I think we can actually work towards a relationship that could be better and stronger than what we might have done when 20, and we just don't know very much, right? We just don't know very much. So that was part of it. And then another challenge was these are sexy books. They're sexy. These are pretty sexy, explicit books, and that was also a very explicit choice as a challenge to me as a writer. I wanted to really, I think in some ways there's sex everywhere now, right? Every time you pick up anything, any TV show, like I have now my daughter's 20, and I try to watch shows together as a way of connecting, and I'm often like, it's sort of embarrassing. So on the one hand, like here I am saying that, right? Like I'm embarrassed to be watching sort of very sexy shows, but I think there's really a place for sex, and I wanted to write sex that I thought could be good, fun to read, not cliche, but really, capture how a sexual awakening in midlife, after maybe you have ignored it in your life or not had a very good sex life, or people have, I'm probably a little older than you, Sunita, but I grew up with, you know, it's funny to think how much sex has changed. I mean, we didn't talk about it with our parents. Our parents may not have even had sex, until they got married. Like that. It's only one generation back, right? But I was raised Catholic. I mean, there was a lot of shame. There was a lot of secrecy, and so I think we're an interesting generation because many of us grew up with some pretty, shadowy, dark, shameful stuff about sex. And then our kids are like, get on Tinder. I'm gonna have sex tonight. Like, no big deal. Like, how do we fit in that, where we sort of see that in the world, and yet we have all this baggage. And so part of the story is a woman's journey from shedding some of that, not only because of a sort of marriage that's gone bad, but also just some of her childhood and background, to being where sex can be fun, exciting, but more importantly, actually an avenue for her to regain confidence lost in a marriage where a very traditional marriage, where but confidence lost in that, power lost in that, self-awareness, and all that can sort of be transformed, through the thrill and of a sexual awakening. So that was another big part of it, to try to use the transformation, and remind women of our age that it's not all it could just be starting, and in some ways, we have the opportunity to reassess a lot of the baggage that we've come to sex with in this new world, where we don't have to throw it all away. We can. I often do want to say to my kids, particularly my daughter, maybe I'm old fashioned, but I think, there's a reason why we want to have a relationship with the people we sleep with, or we want to spend some time before we do that, or why as women it means more to us. And so, be careful with your body, be careful with your sexuality, just tend to it. And what do you want out of it? And don't just listen to the world, and don't just listen to the messages you're getting that it's all just fun and games, or none of it matters. I think it does. And so to kind of do all of that in this book, like why you should maybe open up yourself more to an exciting, thrilling sexual life, but not give up your values about why you want that to be in the context of a loving relationship or a partnership, or other ways of learning how to communicate better, and being honest with each other, and other good values that get into that part of the sexual relationship.
Yeah, I love your why. I find that it's very profound, like you said, for our age, midlife, how you mentioned restarting. Basically, a lot of us somehow are restarting somewhere in our lives, whether if we're taking care of our parents, divorce, transitioning in a career. That seems to be a transitional, I'm not sure what a rites of passage for midlife. Definitely.
Yeah.
So what is the story based on? Is it lightly based on your life? Is it a combination of different people? And what's the synopsis?
Yeah, it's definitely lightly based on my life. I've discovered as I write that I often do write about, I think some people write purely from imagination, and other people I think do write like it's got to have a kernel of what I know to have the genuine emotional resonance. So it's definitely, people reading it might say, it sounds a lot like you, Lisa. But it's a story, to maximum sort of complications. It's a story of a bi-coastal romance. So it's a story of two people connecting in midlife who knew each other previously, knew each other as high school, college, students, friends, but now have live across the country from each other. And so it captures that, as I said, those complications. So they've each moved on in life. They each have failed marriages. They each have single parenting children, jobs or trying to get jobs, all that kind of stuff going on. The female character, the woman protagonist, it's more recent. So she's really struggling with the newness of a divorce, the coming to terms with the heartbreak of that, and even coming to terms with figuring out, is she heartbroken? Is she heartbroken, or is it just her life is imploded, and and it's impacting her children, and that's all very, very bad. But it allows her to sort of assess, how happy was I? How happy was I in that relationship to begin with? And almost the guilt of like, maybe this ex who I'm so angry with, who has blown up our world without much thought, maybe he's done me a favor, right? And so kind of exploring some of that. Some of it's like a sort of financial complications, and the female character, the woman character is very, is well off because her husband supported her well, but she's well off in a way that feels dependent, and so she's working way into independence. Her boyfriend, the male character, is a policeman. He's a struggling single parent. He's sort of getting by paycheck to paycheck. So there's some tension there of his role, her role, who's the comfort level with the finances, and sort of exploring some of that. That's part of the complications. Just the distance is just a complication. How do you pull this off? For the woman, it's kind of it's an interesting. I liked exploring this long distance relationship, because for her, she's so, like many of us, she's so hands-on as a mother and the manager of a family, to then occasionally find herself across the country with no responsibilities is so huge, and kind of allows some of the sexual exploration and exploration of who she wants to be, because very rarely we often don't get that. So she gets that experience, but that's unsettling as well, because because all this other stuff back at home is really important to her too. So how this tension of how to bring two lives, two different lives in her two different worlds together into a life that's fully satisfying. And it takes 2 books to get there. How do they work all this out? Another interesting part of it is, sort of blending families, because I have 5 brothers and sisters. 4 of us are divorced, which is, very unhappy to my parents, the good Catholic parents. Like, how can more than half of my kids, and sometimes we laugh, like we have these picture books, and my dad has passed away, but he had Alzheimer's, and we'd go through these picture books with him all the time. And there's these big pictures of the family when he was like 65, his 65th birthday. And then like it was his 80th birthday. And like, it's like an entirely different, 4 new spouses, right? It's like, whoa, that's really, but that happens, right? And so all of those families in my immediate world have blended, some more, less and more successfully. It's a really, really tricky thing, I think, to blend families, to blend children, to be again, that complicated role of being a parent in one relationship, a step parent. How do you do those different roles? How do you want your partner to do those different roles? How much pressure do you put on the kids? How much can you legitimately expect the kids to buy in? How much is reasonable to expect? How much not? You've already asked so much of them in a divorce, right? They've already had to adjust so much. So, exploring sort of themes of the divorce on kids, and, so.
Yeah, that's a lot of layers, because like you said, most romance books are dealing with young people who have nothing. They don't have all these issues. So a lot of women can definitely relate to that right now.
We look back at some, because now I'm at the stage where I have tons of nieces and nephews, and they're all getting married. And they're all great kids. They're not a one of them is sort of a bridezilla who's sort of just totally obsessed with the wedding and not with the marriage. And I think COVID actually has been interesting for them, because I think COVID kind of put you may not be able to do the wedding of your dreams. I have 3 or 4 nieces that had to put off their weddings 2 or 3 times. And so by the time they got to the actual wedding that they could pull off, it was like small and intimate, and they had worked really hard, and it was beautiful. It's like, okay, you guys get the message. It's not about the wedding. It's about the marriage, right? Yeah. But you do look at young couples and you're like, wow, gosh, you just think you're going to control everything, don't you? You think you got this all down. Totally. You should. That's the right attitude. You think you got this all down. You think you can plan everything. You think you know everything's going. I mean, I thought that when I got married. I had an early experience of that. I suffered infertility. I spent like 8 years infertility treatments, and ultimately my own children are adopted. So that was a pretty early thing of like, woo, you think you can control things, and boy, you don't at all.
Yeah, but that's the biggest life lesson. Can you read an excerpt of your book?
Okay, so here we're actually in book 2 here, and Lori, the protagonist, has had a rough week with her teenage son, and decides to try meeting a group of divorced women in her community that she's discovered meet once a month at a local restaurant. So she shows up. Let's skip that part. She walked into the restaurant. The restaurant was crowded, but Lori spied a group of women who all looked between 40 and 50, sitting around a table near the bar. It seemed a likely target, and Lori approached. "Excuse me, but is this the group for divorcees?" one woman said with a fake French accent, and everyone laughed. "But of course," another said. "Are you eligible?" There was more chuckling. "Actually, yes." "Oh, hello then. I'm Susan." The first woman who had spoken stood up, dropped the silly accent, and embraced Lori warmly. "Let's get you a chair." She grabbed an empty one from the next table and squeezed it beside her own. "And a drink," another woman added. She had large, coal-embellished eyes, curly dark hair, and exotic earrings. "I'm Jill." She put out her hand, then quickly went around the table with further introductions while Jill motioned for the waitress. Lori was about to ask for a glass of red wine, but noticed all the women seemed to be sipping real drinks. "What are you all having?" There was a chorus: vodka martini, Cosmo, margarita, Manhattan. "I'll have one of those, a Manhattan." "Good choice," Jill said. "We like women who are serious about drinking." There was more laughter followed by an awkward pause while they waited for Lori's drink to arrive. Then another woman, Leslie, a blonde wearing a preppy blouse and pearls, raised her glass. "To our new member, Lori." "To Lori," the rest of the group chimed in and lifted their glasses and drank. Susan, Lori noted, was on the younger side, a little plump, with autumn hair and a ponytail, soft, pretty features, and no makeup. She looked at Lori intently and asked, "So, what's your sob story?" My ex." "Wait, let me guess. There was a younger woman," Eliana said. She was the last of the foursome, sitting at Lori's other side, a striking brunette with expertly applied makeup and wearing a silk blouse. "No, though I know," Jill jumped in. "He's a workaholic or a narcissist. Or wait, a narcissistic workaholic." "I'll drink to that," Leslie said, and everyone laughed. "Actually, you're not far off. My ex." Lori was cut off again. "Don't bother with the deets. We can guess. Give us the stats," Jill said. "Kids, how many? How long since the divorce?" Lori gave her stats. She'd never thought of her family quite that way before. Jill and Eliana volunteered that their stats were similar. "What made you decide to join us tonight?" Susan asked, turning to Lori. "Dad's weekend?" "Actually, my kids are with me, but they're both out with friends, and I was rattling around the house feeling sorry for myself." "I used to dread weekends when my kids were with their father," Susan said. "I've got 3 boys, 10, 12, and 14, and the house feels so empty. Then I realized I dread when they come back. My peace and quiet shattered, but that only lasts a day before I'm too swamped by the chaos to notice." 3 boys, that sounds hard," Lori said, "especially since they're at different schools this year, elementary, middle, and high school, and all 3 are athletes," Susan added proudly. "So there's a lot of driving to practice and games. I feel like I live in my minivan." "Amen to that," Leslie added. "I bet your girls have their own secret world going on," Susan said to Leslie. "I think girls are harder that way." "Mine are pretty easy these days," Leslie responded, "only because they're both holed up in their rooms on social media. It cannot be healthy. I never thought I'd say it, but I miss their needing me to entertain them." "I'm so tired of the fight to get mine to turn off their devices," Susan added. "Of course, there's no rules at their dad's house, so I have to be the bad guy." "Have you seen the articles on how smartphones are destroying our children, literally making them depressed, anxious, suicidal?" "Can we change the subject?" Eliana asked, followed by a dramatic pause. "I want to know how the dating is going, ladies." There was a chorus of uggs. "What dating?" Susan asked. The other women laughed half-heartedly. "Lori," Eliana turned to her seat to face Lori, "have you started dating?" "I'm in a relationship." "That was fast." Jill whipped her head towards Lori. "Tell us your secret." Jill was smiling, but Lori sensed a slight blanket of hostility wrap around the table. She stayed quiet. "How did you meet?" Susan asked Lori. "I've known him since we were in high school." "Ah, the long-lost love. That explains it," Jill asked. She circled the table with her hand. "This group has been stuck with hookups on Tinder or dates with old men who only want to take a lady to the opera." "I prefer the term mature," Eliana said. "And they're not all bad. It can be nice to be treated well." if you want to be bored to death. Elena looked at Jill sharply and called over to the waitress, announcing that they needed another round. You all use Tinder? Lori asked, looking around the table. Actually, it's only me, Jill answered, one eyebrow raised, when I get an itch for a non-masturbatory orgasm. How does that work? I hope you're not asking me how to get yourself off. It's easy. Oh, of course not, Lori said, blushing. I mean Tinder. It's easy, girl, Jill said, with the sassy flair. We're living in the digital age. I could never do that, Leslie interjected. And that's why you're slowly dying from lack of sex. Jill, that's mean, Susan said. We don't do that here. So you have sex, Lori interrupted, with strangers? You should try it. It can be quite liberating. Do they come to your house? Lori asked with genuine curiosity. It depends. We usually meet at a bar for a drink so I can make sure the guy's not a serial killer. I've got a good spidey sense. I generally swipe younger guys, the kind that like to show an older woman they know how to please. Jill gave the group a broad smile. For goodness sake, Susan said, how can you tell that from a Tinder profile? It's easy, sweetie. There's code language. You've heard the term MILF. I don't get it, Susan interrupted. Sex is so intimate. How do you do it with the perfect stranger? All your exes were strangers once, Jill answered. But we didn't jump into bed back then without knowing each other first, said Leslie. At least I didn't. I think it would be too hard. Leslie glanced around the table in search of allies. To have sex with someone totally unknown after having sex with the same man for so many years. That's making a big assumption, Jill said, eyebrows raised again. But that's the point. No baggage or another person to clean up after in the morning. That part I like, Leslie said, nodding. Look, Jill added, in the tone of someone who's seen it all. We're just bodies. Mechanism is designed for pleasure. A stiff drink is all it takes to loosen up the important parts. Lori couldn't help laughing. Actually, I like someone eating me in the morning, Susan said, looking down at her drink. Leslie reached out to touch her hand. How come you're not with your boyfriend tonight, Jill asked. He lives in Seattle. What? We see each other once a weekend a month. We see each other one weekend a month. We take turns traveling. I see how that could work, Jill said, her lips pursed. A guaranteed weekend of great sex each month. I assume the sex is great. Lori felt herself blushing again. She was a little drunk and feared her cheeks were cherry red, so she stared into her Manhattan. When Lori lifted her drink to take a sip, she could see all eyes were on her. Spill the beans, Lori, Jill said. Hearing about great sex is almost as good as getting it. It's good, said Lori after a pause. I don't believe you're flying across country for sex that's just good. Jill was shaking her head. Lori took another sip. It's really good, actually, and that still surprises me because I hadn't enjoyed sex for like a decade. I think that throws a wrench in Jill's theory, Leslie said. Women are not like cars or washing machines. We have complicated feelings tied up with sex. Maybe, Jill paused for effect, or maybe some men are just better mechanics. The whole table laughed. The attention thankfully diverted from Lori's sex life and took a turn to the mundane, the weather, the drudgery of sleeping kids. Did the town really need another Whole Foods? Lori looked at her phone for the first time all evening. Wow, it's getting late. I better be home before I'm too drunk to drive, especially since I insisted my son not drink tonight. Well, we'll let you off the hook once, Jill winked at Lori. Next month, you have to share the juicy details. So,
a lot of layers.
So yeah, and I think that's the one I wanted. There's another time where she meets up with them and they kind of talk about further exploring why do women our age date? Is it for fear? Is it for financial security? Mm-hmm. Are we really sacrifice by dating older men? Because you hear that a lot on the dating sites. Women are afraid, like they want a nurse. I want a purse. Like some of these stereotypes of why women date. A little bit of antagonism or envy when it's working for some people and not for others.
So Lisa, how would someone find your book? And is there any other information you might want them to go to your website to search for?
Yeah, so both books can be found on Amazon.com and Barnes and Noble. And I also have a webpage, lisabattaglia.com, where it's very easy to connect to the books. And there's some other short stories there. I do think my again, another beauty of middle age is we look back and realize in some ways that we've been working towards something all the time and we didn't know it, right? So my lawyer work has always been in gender equity. And I find myself writing books about sort of gender equity in some ways in actual people's lives. How does equity or lack of equity in the relationships we create, and how can we improve those? It's kind of an interesting connection. And some of my stories are very much about transitions, different parts, different periods of transitions. But I do find I'm very fascinated with how we make transitions and how we can come out at the other end better than where we started. Doesn't It's not guaranteed, but that's what the books try to explore, the ways that we do that, and the pitfalls and the joyful times.
Yeah. All we can do is do your best. That's all.
Yep, I know, right?
Yeah.
And someone was telling me recently, there's a quote from someone famous, like I think Nietzsche or somebody, that's like, you have to assume when you made those decisions, you had to assume that they were made on the best information you had at the time. And if you're looking back and sort of thinking it wasn't, it's not. It's because you have more information now. You have better information. You're smarter, right? But isn't that important, right? Because so much, and I think a lot in these books explore too how to move away from regret, how to move away from, why did I not do that? Why did I do that? Because you know, it doesn't get you anywhere. It's not going to take you to a better place, but and not just ignore those, but to honestly be kind to yourself. Like I did those things for the right reasons at the time, or for the best information I had at the time, and be grateful that I'm lucky enough now to have better information and different information and have the opportunity to act on that. Right. That's a really place of gratitude and kindness and gratitude.
Yeah, that's the mission of your book. If you haven't thought of that before, the mission of your books are helping women, midlife and older, whatever, move from regret.
Yeah.
That's significant, especially at our age.
Right. Yeah. And it is very much the theme, how we move away from all of those things, and not, again, not dump, you can't get rid of all of the life that came from those things that you did that you might regret. So you don't regret any of it because you have the beautiful children that, right? I mean, people often have the experience like, why did I marry that person? But if I didn't marry that person, I wouldn't have these children. So that's a really great way to, okay, so I love those children. I want those children. Whatever happened then created those children. And now, I did the best I could at that time. And now where do I want to move forward in my more authentic, I think it's often a more authentic, honest place. And I think the other big piece I explore in these books, and it's kind of a funny thing that you explore with my sister, because her world is about career advice. Seems entirely different than writing romance novels, but we kind of came to this recognition that we were both of our stories, both of where we went, they have to be, whether it's a romance or whether it's a career, whether it's your career transition, whether it's a transition through midlife relationships, you have to start with some values. You have to start with core values. You have to think about those. You have to figure out what those are, which I think women often were so busy just handling the cards that were dealt, all of those caretaking roles that we often didn't ask for, but somehow wind up with. They can be enormously challenging, so time consuming, so overwhelming. I have a friend now who's thinking about divorcing 30 years down the line, realizing that, first it was, she got married and then her father was sick and then she had babies and then her mother was sick and moved in with them. And that, and basically she spent her entire life without really actively seeking to take care of these various people. Right. But her whole life is caretaking. Now she didn't attend to her marriage. And now what does she do about that? But so to stop, it's not too late. What were the values that were represented by all that work that I've done, but what are really the values that are core to me that I want to see moving forward, and shape all my decisions, whether it's relationships or jobs or where I live or who I marry or who I, what volunteer work, whatever it is, all of it, what community I make myself part of, where I give my time and attention, my talents to reinforce those core values that matter to me.
Yeah.
And don't let them get lost.
So to find Lisa's books, more information, and read her short stories, etc., go to www.lisabattaglia.com. Thank you so much for joining us, Lisa.
Thanks, Nita. Appreciate it. Thanks. Enjoy the opportunity. Bye-bye.